Hey all, John here. Welcome back to the On Mission podcast, an SWBA podcast series exploring life on mission and tools for mission. And one of the major tools for mission over the last couple of decades has been the Alpha course. And I had a great conversation with Nathan Sadler, the head of Alpha in Wales, about the picture of Alpha here. Where's it running? How many? How's it going? Really great conversation. We talk about what success in Alpha, actually success in mission, looks like, the kind of attitudes that really help Alpha and evangelism function and work healthy and work well. We also get on to Jesus's willingness to be interrupted, which is something I've thought a lot about since our conversation. As always, if you enjoy this, please do share, like, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell if you'd like to be kept updated. And please do join the conversation. We'd love to hear comments of how this conversation's landed. What's it made you think about? How's it challenged or stretched you in your thinking? So let me introduce you to Nathan. Well, Nathan, it's so great to have you with us today. Thank you so much for your time. And I was thinking, I'm sure most people have heard a bit about Alpha. A lot of churches will have done it or are doing it. But for anybody that, has been off the planet the last kind of couple of decades, how would you introduce Alpha to them?
Yes, I would introduce Alpha as really a great way for people who wouldn't call themselves Christians or wouldn't perhaps say that they're regular churchgoers. A great opportunities for people like that, people who are exploring, people who are curious just about starting from scratch. Okay, what is life all about? What is faith about? What kind of can I have as meaning in my life? Alpha is just a great kind of entry point for anyone like that with any of those questions or any of those thought processes. Alpha's a place to discuss that. So it's a series of videos where we'll watch a short video with a kind of a theme of faith behind each video. And then there's a time for people to discuss then about what they've just seen. So they can bring any question. We always say that no question is off the table with Alpha. So you can really come with any background or with any kind of question or opinion is completely available to do so at Alpha. And what we see with Alpha is that anyone who comes on to an alpha, often hosted by churches, is that actually because we're having these kind of conversations, the kind of the bare minimum of what happens at an alpha is that actually you kind of just develop friendships, that those relationships happening. And the kind of the what we hope for, and certainly what I pray for, is that people find more than just a friendship and a relationship with those who are hosting an alpha course, that they might actually kind of hear and really kind of take in truths of Jesus and the gospel message seen throughout the video series, and that through discussion, that they kind of work that out. But Alpha is just a great entry point, really, for those people. And we say that because Jesus worked things out with his early followers by asking questions, by kind of, turning questions into another question. He spoke in parables and in questions. Rarely did Jesus ever give direct answers. Okay, so basically, we're just trying to model Alpha as best we can, like Jesus' ministry.
That's an amazing answer. Yeah, I love the idea that it's an entry point, and
Mm.
it's a place where, and I think that is really important that you're journeying with others, some that you'll know, some that you'll get to know
Mm.
along the journey, because I don't know that's like a really meaningful part of the journey. So what's your sort of kind of connection with Alpha?
Yeah, so I work for Alpha in Wales. There's a small team of us. Just quickly thinking off the top of my head, there's three of us in Wales. And I head up the team in Wales. I'm originally from Colwyn Bay in North Wales,
Mm.
but now currently live in Swansea in the south. And really, what I do, my kind of connection currently is that I work for Alpha. I'm very blessed to be able to do this as a job.
Mm,
Um, but really, I do that now because I first was a host and a helper on an Alpha course in my local
mm,
church as well. So when I came to Swansea as a university student, we did and still do our Alpha courses on the pub that's on the university campus.
mm,
And
mm,
each time we ran it, again, before I worked for Alpha, I saw people who were just, friends of housemates or course mates or colleagues come to the pub, you know,
mm.
and talk about Jesus over a bowl of chips or onion rings. And I just thought, this is amazing. This is what
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking about on a Sunday. This is what I'm
yeah.
reading about that we should be doing in the Bible of just having really open, kind of honest conversations with people about
Mm,
big life conversations and about faith, and it's happening weekly, and I get
yeah,
to
yeah.
kind of play a small part in that and in God's command. So I got really excited when I was kind of helping out with Alpha myself, and then yeah, an opportunity came up to start working for Alpha, and I thought, wow, yeah, what an incredible opportunity.
And there's nothing quite like it, is there? Because I think, there's that passage in Matthew's Gospel, I think it's Matthew chapter 10, where Jesus sends the disciples out to kind of continue what he's been doing, what they've seen him doing. And there's a sort of there's a fear and an apprehension, anxiety about doing that. And then when they come back, they're all just raving with, things that
Yeah.
they've seen happen. And I think sometimes until we actually open our mouths and let
Mhm.
an invitation or the name Jesus or can I
Yeah.
pray for you, wherever it is, escape our lips, we're almost robbing ourselves of that journey, aren't we, to
Yeah.
see it
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I think sometimes I think the church can be a bit guilty of kind of making everyday evangelism either quite
Mm,
boring or quite prescriptive. Sorry.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I just don't see that when I like, read the Bible and
mm, mm,
when I read about how Jesus did things. It always feels like a bit of an adventure,
yeah,
and
yeah,
um, I think that's what's quite exciting about Alpha is that you're kind of going on a journey. You're kind of going on an adventure with these people, exploring faith. And for me, and I give often trainings to people who perhaps it's their first time leading an alpha for themselves. And I always say to them, and it's not a lie, that because I've done it dozens and dozens and dozens of times now, but every single term, I still get something new myself. A, from watching the videos that I've seen 100 times before, there's always something new that stands out to me, but also being in a conversation with someone, with a stranger who is exploring for the first time matters of faith, that
yeah,
really sharpens my own faith. It really gets me thinking of, okay, what do I believe? Why is that element
yeah.
of my faith important? And I think it's a really important kind of muscle to flex, really. And again, alpha's that playground to flex those muscles, if you like.
Yeah, that's a great image, Nathan, of flexing the mission muscle. I love that,
Mm,
and actually, being brave enough to step out and to try it. Because the other thing that there's nothing like is to see, the kind of the penny dropping, the light beginning to turn on, whether that's an immediate sort of sudden realization or growing one over a period of time. It's like being present at a birth somehow, isn't it? It's just
yeah.
nothing quite like it.
Yeah, and it is, and you know, again, I can say truthfully that every course that I've been a part of, whether as a host or as a helper, like someone always makes a commitment at the end of it, and it might be a really great kind of redemption story. They might have really responded to one of the videos and kind of prayed the prayer of salvation. But it might be like a really quiet, gentle,
Yeah,
like response as well. Um, I can't honestly think of an alpha where we've gone on the 11 weeks and like nothing's happened. There's, that's I think, the Holy Spirit doesn't need too much persuasion to work. But if you've been doing it for 11 weeks, the chances of something happening is pretty great. And I would say to people as well who perhaps have done Alpha before and maybe not had like great redemption stories or perhaps been disheartened, like that's all okay as well. The thing I often say to churches is, you know, if you're inviting people to come on an Alpha, or if you're even going through an Alpha course with people, if their response to your invitation, or even if their response to the gospel is no, okay, that's a shame. But is that going to stop us from ever being evangelists again or ever inviting someone else? I think if the worst answer we can receive is a no, then for me, let's continue to roll our sleeves up really, because we're fortunate enough to be somewhere where we can keep on asking and keep on inviting people.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the seed falls on all kind of soil, doesn't it? But
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
nothing wrong with the seed itself. It's how it's
Yeah,
received. Definitely.
absolutely.
So you work for Alpha Wales. I
Mm.
thought it'd be great to ask you kind of what's the picture really for Wales in terms of Alpha as a form of evangelism right now.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's really looking good. Again, I often have to remind myself that because I work for Alpha, I'm often privy to really exciting stories and testimonies. And my wife is a primary school teacher, and kind of when I'm telling her stories of evangelism, it's really exciting and really encouraging. But I know as well that people aren't privy to that as often as I am with speaking to churches. But I do see a real kind of an uplift in people doing Alpha courses. So something that we've always been quite hot on at Alpha is stats, and the number of Alpha courses taking place in Wales has been rising steadily, basically in the last 10 years. In the last 10
Wow.
years, there's been a kind of boom with Alpha. Um, and in 2020, which is obviously the COVID year, we had quite good numbers. So Alpha Online, if you
Mm,
cast your mind back to that,
mm,
people really clung to that, and realized that they needed still some form of evangelism that they could do over COVID. And we saw this great figure of 215 courses in Wales
mm.
in
Wow.
2020. We thought, wow, this kind of record year. And this year already, we're on 300 courses in
Wow.
Wales.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
what we were getting really excited about, and justifiably so, in 2020, we've already like added another 100 to it. And I say
Mhm,
we, that's kind of nothing I've done, but I
mm,
believe there's a greater groundswell happening in Wales around evangelism.
mm.
And Alpha really is just a tool. I, I believe that God's had his hand on Alpha and for some reason or other. But I think the what's happening kind of in the spirit behind
Yeah.
Alpha is just a kind of reaction to what's already kind of been taking place, and the
Mm, mm,
groundwork that have been there in Wales for, like I
mm,
said, the last 10 or so years. So, yeah, we've got currently over 300 courses being ran in Wales. So that's 162 churches running. We're also seeing a good kind of news story is that Alpha Youth courses have had a real uptake. So 58 churches are running Alpha Youth, and 71 courses being run for it. So again, that's just Alpha, but contextualized for
yeah.
youth
Yeah.
settings. And it's in prisons as well. So 6 courses this year have been run in prisons across Wales. So it's really like encouraging. And if and trust me when I say that if our numbers were down and it wasn't encouraging, I would be telling you so. But um, I'm telling you this because I do I do see a real uptake in alpha. And again, because of my own personal experience of being on alpha courses where people have made, um, a step of faith, or as you said, at least a seed was sown. I think if there's been an increase of courses being ran, I also think there's been an increase in people's warmth to the gospel and kind of want to experience some kind of encounter as well. So it's really encouraging. It's really
Yeah,
encouraging.
yeah. And what you're talking about there, I guess there's a huge sense of variety as well. So, you mentioned churches running it, but it being run, in and for and by youth as well, which is amazing. Prisons online, we certainly did a course online during COVID, and yeah, for all the nervousness around how that was going to work, we're super blessed
Mm,
by doing it. In terms of running Alpha. How do you think in terms of success is a wrong word because the success is in the sowing of the seed, isn't it?
yeah.
That's our part. But what kind of things do you think really help Alpha to run well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, I think, like you say, in terms of the success, it's the sowing of the seed. So one real positive and bonus about alpha is that on the surface, it doesn't require a lot from you. So
Mm,
we often say that, there's three core parts to an alpha. That's the food or the hospitality, as we often kind of rebrand it now. Um, so there's the food, then there's the video, then there's discussion, and as long as you have those three things in place, you're doing an alpha. Um, and the video is where the main kind of gospel message, if you like, is shared. And so the ways to run it as kind of soundly as we can is just a like around food. I say to people because it's being ran in some really big churches and it's also being ran in like parents and tots groups. There's a real variety. What I say for that is just do the best to like your capability. If there's someone who wants to put on a three-course meal each week, do not hold them back. That's fantastic. But then if budget only permits something like squash and a pack of digestives, brilliant. Go
mm,
ahead with that. I think that the things we can do really just to make sure we're doing it as best as we can, if you like, is just really prioritizing that key element of making people feel welcome and heard. Alpha doesn't work if you're pushing anything down people's throat.
mm, mm,
When we as a kind of alpha team, we do a lot of research into how do non-Christians basically come to church or what's the deciding factors for them. And the
mm,
kind of number one turn off for a lot of people is basically if they feel like they're forced to do something they don't want to do. Um,
mm, mm,
so a key part, and that first part of alpha being food, is about half an hour of the evening. So it
mm,
takes up a third of the evening, but it's of equal importance to the other two-thirds. So it's of equal importance to that video and discussion. But all you're
mm,
doing is eating food and just chatting about how your day's been, how your week's been. We kind of say,
yeah,
do not talk about anything heavy like religion or politics in that
yeah,
section. Just
yeah,
build
yeah.
relationship. And then in the discussion, it's just ask questions. The kind of the cliched response we always ask people to keep in their mind is, "That's really interesting, but what do you think?"
Yeah.
And because again, if someone is completely new to church or the idea of Jesus, if they're coming into a space that's talking about life, faith, and meaning, then if my response to someone who is asked a question such as, am I alone in my suffering?
Mm,
If I
mm,
respond by saying, well, there's this great passage in Job that says X, Y, Z, that's a great kind of academic theological answer. But
Sure.
for that person who has no basis or context for anything to do with Christianity, that's not going to mean anything.
Yeah.
So the best thing we can do as a host and helper is a few things really. So firstly is to ask that question, that's really interesting. What do you think?
Mm,
We
mm,
just want to generate conversation. The second thing we can do is like share our own story. So if there's something that relates to a part of our testimony or a real story that we've experienced, we can do that.
yeah.
And then in the third thing we can do is just to relate back to the video as well. So, like I said, for
Yes.
people who are completely new to the whole speaking about Jesus in public, which
Mm,
again, if you're outside of church, that's something quite scary.
mm,
Their
mm,
their only point of reference is what they've just seen on the video.
yeah.
So that's the meeting ground, if you like, for us engaging with them on the same
Yeah.
level. So it's
Yeah.
asking questions, it's sharing kind of our own bits of our testimony, and it's referring back to the videos. That's the main pillars of what we can be doing as hosts and helpers to make
Mm,
sure the discussion flows, I suppose.
yeah. There's a lot in there, Nath, actually, in terms of sometimes we imagine that we're all welcome in church.
Sure.
But actually, what does it mean to welcome somebody? And
Yeah.
if we just see people walking in as more numbers, or just if we don't see the people, if we
Mm,
don't
mhm.
care about them and their starting point, actually that's quite unwelcoming, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know Nicky Gumbel, who kind of pioneered Alpha?
Mm,
Um, always says that people on an Alpha course are people to love and not targets to hit.
yeah,
And I think that's
yeah,
just a great kind of mindset for church in general, really, is that
yeah.
the command from God on our lives to go, and to
Mm,
go and make disciples, that is a very clear and obvious one.
mm,
And, it's not to kind of demean stuff like strategy and vision and stuff. But
mm,
I think, Jesus in his ministry also had strategy, he also had vision. He knew what his calling was. He
mm,
he he
mm,
went about doing it very strategically with having 12 disciples and with having followers, and he had very clear callings for each of his disciples. But
mm,
also, he was willing to be interrupted at every single opportunity. If anyone suddenly bumped into him with a question, he
mm,
always allowed himself to be interrupted. And whoever was in front of him at that moment was like the most important person in the world to Jesus in that moment. So it's a similar thing
yeah,
for us with Alpha. We've got kind of teams all around the world trying to help local churches a little bit with mission and evangelism. But ultimately, if we're at an Alpha course in the evening with the video has just finished and it's time for discussion, our priority in that moment is just to love our neighbor who is just
mm,
exploring these things and helping them, being kind of standing true to what we believe, yes, but kind of gentle in how we let them explore as well. So yeah, people to love and not targets to hit.
yeah. That's profound. That really is profound. The I love what you were saying earlier about the sense of welcome, but then recognizing that for some people this will be their only reference point.
Yeah.
And earlier on, you used the phrase about Alpha being a great sort of entry level.
Mhm.
And I think one of the gifts of Alpha is the language that it helps people to discover,
Yeah.
to find words for their longings or their questions or hopes
Yeah.
or whatever it is, and to not be afraid to enter into, engage with that language as the only sort of common ground, if you like, in that moment, the only reference
Yeah.
point.
Oh yeah. It's I'm often really aware sometimes of when I build up too much Christianese in my kind of vocabulary. I think
Yeah,
anyone
yeah,
who works in ministry or for Christian organizations, because they're surrounded by followers of Jesus, we kind of adopt our own kind of slang at times, don't we? And
mm, mm,
have that kind of Christian bubble. Um, and again, I think Alpha is just a good exercise to try and shed some of that Christianese and to
yes,
meet people again on their own. on their own landscape. It's again going back to Jesus' ministry and even Paul in the letters he wrote in such a personable way to whoever the audience.
Yes.
Um, he knew exactly who his kind of audience was, Paul.
Mm,
Um, and
mm,
he could have spoken to them with just a very, um, again, sort of with that kind of Christianese, I suppose. But no, he actually decided to kind of meet people where they're at. You have to
mm.
meet people where they're at. You have to engage with them on their level. And I think again, whether it's through alpha or through whatever, I think just that exercise of meeting people where they're at is really important and helpful to our own kind of our own faith.
Brilliant. Oh, and it's been so great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Diolch.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.